doesn't work with calories, it works with hormones. Doing cardio to lose weight is actually making you fat. It's because doing cardio spikes your cortisol levels, your stress hormone, which is directly correlated to insulin, which is your fat storage hormone.
I recently made a video about this, but I really want to go more in depth on cortisol. Because if you've been on social media for long enough, you probably think that cortisol is the most useless and damaging hormone that the body produces. With that being said, that couldn't be further from the truth. First of all, cortisol is what gives you mental energy. That increase in cortisol is what allows you to wake up and start your day. And every morning you get a large spike in cortisol. Cortisol has very interesting effects on the release and uptake of fatty acids. Cortisol will increase the amount of glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids released into the bloodstream. So in this way, cortisol is actually a fat-releasing hormone, not a fat storage hormone. However, cortisol will certainly increase the uptake of the available fuel in the bloodstream at different tissues like the muscle, liver, brain, and adipose tissue. With that being said, when we're exercising, the majority of our blood flow is being diverted towards the working muscle, which means we may be releasing free fatty acids from our stored fat tissue, and these fatty acids are being uptaken and utilized as fuel by the muscle tissue, which is why the cortisol released during exercise is actually important to aid in fat reduction. Now see, I believe that this creator is confusing chronically elevated cortisol, typically in response to some sort of adrenal disease or some sort of chronic psychological stress, with the healthy and beneficial cortisol release that we get in response to exercise. When we have chronically elevated cortisol, this does mean we will be constantly releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream. But since the muscles do not have any increased demand to uptake fatty acids to use them as energy, the muscles will not be uptaking the fatty acids out of our bloodstream. Additionally, the majority of our blood flow will be diverted towards our organs. And our organs have a very high concentration of cortisol receptors. And as I mentioned, cortisol also has the effect to stimulate the uptake of fat at the adipose tissue. And once again, if the muscles aren't going to be uptaking it, and once again, if this elevated cortisol does not come in tandem with elevated activity and elevated energetic demands at the muscle, the adipose cells that line our organs, referred to as visceral adipose cells, are going to be the main site that these fatty acids are going to be uptaken and stored, which is why chronically elevated cortisol is associated with an increase in visceral fat, which is located around the abdominal area, which is what gives you the perception of increased stomach fat. But remember, this is when cortisol is elevated when we are not exercising. And when we look at the studies, we find that fitter individuals have reduced cortisol in response to a psychosocial stress. So as a byproduct of exercise, we actually release less cortisol in response to a mental stress. Additionally, in response to training, at rest we have increases in testosterone and decreases in cortisol. And in this study, they concluded that high-intensity interval training continued for 8 weeks positively affects the balance between testosterone and cortisol. Additionally, high-volume, moderate-intensity continuous training can help reduce abdominal visceral fat. Additionally, this study that looked at the influence of hormones on strength and hypertrophy, the only hormone they found significantly correlated with increases in lean body mass is going to be cortisol. So there are a lot of people on the internet telling you that anything that increases your cortisol is going to be inherently dangerous and negative. And because exercise is the most common and most typical way that we increase cortisol, we have jumped to the conclusion that somehow exercise is going to lead to fat gain. But we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, exercise is one of, if not the most potent tools for long-term sustainable weight loss. And if you want to learn how to take control of your health and energy and avoid a lot of the misinformation online, send me a DM to sign up for coaching.